This is Mac OS Ken.
Recapping Apple's March quarter earnings. It is Friday, the 3rd of May, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by ExpressVPN. Use the internet the way you want to. Subscribe and get an extra 3 months free at expressvpn.com/MacOSCan. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. If you told me yesterday that an earnings call that had Apple reporting iPhone revenue down 10%, iPad revenue down 17%, and wearables, home, and accessories revenue down 10%, if you told me yesterday that that call would somehow end up feeling good, I won't say I would have doubted you, but I would have wondered how that could be. Maybe it was the strong showing for iPhone in China and emerging markets, which we will get to. Maybe it was all the excitement around Apple and AI, which we will get to. Maybe it was the short yet thorough schooling Apple CEO Tim Cook gave one analyst about numbers that come from outside of Apple, which we will get to. Or maybe it was the feeling that one sometimes loses. Apple is more than the sum of its parts. That said, the parts were mixed. Apple's press release on the numbers had the company posting quarterly revenue of $90.8 billion on earnings per share of $1.53. Apple had warned on the last earnings call and reminded participants yesterday that the company expected a shortfall of $5 billion in iPhone revenue versus the same quarter a year ago. iPhone saw a sales surge in the March of 2023 quarter, making up sales missed in the December quarter of 2022 due to production disruptions. Apple's March miss on iPhone revenue was closer to $5.4 billion than $5 billion, and yet revenue for the entire company only missed by about $4 billion. Scratch that. Revenue for the entire company was only lower by about $4 billion. Apple guided on the last call for the $5 billion headwind, so it seems to have beaten its own guidance. As for the street's expectations, a piece from Apple Insider on Thursday had consensus calling for revenue between $82.3 billion and $86.1 on earnings per share of $1.50. So Apple beat those two. In fact, the $1.53 earnings per share reported was a March quarter record, according to Apple CEO Tim Cook and Apple CFO Luca Maestri. The $1.53 was one of several records touted by the Apple execs. In his prepared remarks, CEO Cook said the company set revenue records in more than a dozen countries and regions. Those include, among others, March quarter records in Latin America and the Middle East, as well as Canada, India, Spain, and Turkey. Apple also achieved an all-time record revenue in Indonesia, one of the many markets where they continue to see so much potential. See also services. Apple set an all-time revenue record for those, according to the CEO, but we'll make our way that way. Let's start with iPhone. Yes, revenue dropped from about $51 billion to about $46 billion, a decrease of 10%. It sort of looks like it would have dropped by $500 million without the $5 billion warning, but when the numbers get so big, $500 million looks flat. iPhone did well a lot of places. According to a survey from Kantar, according to CFO Maestri, an iPhone was the top-selling model in the US, Australia, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and, hang on to your hats, in mainland China. Citing the same Kantar count, Apple CEO said during the quarter the two best-selling smartphones in urban China were the iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro Max. Whether faith should be put in that assertion is a question to which we will come back. Customer satisfaction is crazy, by the way. Here in the States, 451 Research puts it at 99%. The star of the show would probably have to be services, though the Mac would have to be considered for best supporting, maybe even with its name above the title. March quarter Mac revenue came in at $7.5 billion, up 4% from the same quarter a year earlier. That seems to have been driven by what CEO Cook called an amazing launch in early March for the new M3-powered 13-inch and 15-inch MacBook Air. Both Cook and CFO Maestri heralded the machine's AI performance. What earned the Mac a strong supporting title was Mr. Maestri's assertion that the 10% fall for iPhone was partially offset by strength from Mac. And everybody digs it. Customer satisfaction in the U.S. comes in at 96%. Into the ditch we go. iPad revenue came in at $5.6 billion, 17% lower than the same quarter a year earlier. Last year, they were still selling new M2 iPad Pro units as well as 10th generation iPads. Those are the same iPads they are still selling, so no bump up this time. And yet, Apple's tablet is still on a good overall trajectory. CFO Maestri says the install base is at an all-time high, with over half the people who bought an iPad last quarter coming new to the device. Also, very diggable, customer satisfaction in the States is at 96%. We'll stay in the revenue rut across wearables, home, and accessories. There we find Apple reporting $7.9 billion, a decline of 10% year-on-year. There was still much excitement in March of 2023 over the first Apple Watch Ultra, Apple Watch SE, and the second-generation AirPods Pro. Maestri laid the category's underperformance last quarter at the feet of a difficult launch compare. Again, though, the category is bringing in the noobs. Almost two-thirds of customers buying an Apple Watch last quarter were buying their first one, sending Apple Watch install base to a new all-time high. And watch wearers seem happy with it. Customer satisfaction is at 95%. Time now to hit the ramp and jump a bunch of buses. Services hit an all-time revenue record of $23.9 billion, up 14% from the same quarter a year earlier. Both transacting accounts and paid accounts reached a new all-time high, according to Apple CFO, who said both grew double digits. Apple has well over 1 billion paid subscriptions across the services on its platform. That is more than twice the number they had just 4 years ago. As the installed base of active devices continues to grow, Maestri suspects services will as well. Looking ahead, the company guided for revenue for the June quarter to be up low single digits. Revenue for services will grow double digits. Revenue for iPad is expected to grow double digits. Gross margins to come in between 45.5% and 46.5%. OPEX should be between $14.3 and $14.5 billion. OINE is expected to be around $50 million, and Apple's tax rate should be around 16%. Given the good feelings, CFO Maestri said Apple's board has authorized an additional $110 billion for share repurchases. The company is also raising its dividend by 4% to 25 cents per share. That will be payable on the 16th of May to shareholders of record as of the 13th. All of that stated, it was time to get to questions and answers. We will get to those in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. For me, the biggest selling points for a good virtual private network are privacy and speed. ExpressVPN shields all of my internet traffic with strong encryption, which I really appreciate. It also does it with no perceptible hit to performance, which is very cool too. Another big selling point? Watching what you can't watch where you are. If a service where you are doesn't have access to something you want to see, but it does for another country, ExpressVPN can help. See, ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're coming in from. You're paying for Netflix, right? Or Hulu or whatever. Get what you're paying for and then some with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN has been my virtual private network for years. It's easy to use, it's fast, works on your smartphone, smart TV, laptop, and more. And right now, it's coming your way with a pretty good deal. Whether you want to access a literal world of content or just keep the world out of your business, use my link right now, expressvpn.com/macOSKen, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/macOSKen to learn more. expressvpn.com/macOSKen. I mentioned at the start the sort of good feeling around yesterday's call. Part of that may have come from next week's Let Loose event. In his prepared remarks, Apple CEO Tim Cook said the company is getting ready for an exciting product announcement next week that they think their customers will love. That is worth remembering as we head into yesterday's Q&A. Picking up close to where Apple CFO Maestri left off, Goldman Sachs analyst Mike Ng wanted to know about the low single-digit revenue growth expected for the June quarter. Maestri reiterated what he had said before, that Apple is expecting for services revenue to grow double digits and for iPad revenue to grow double digits, and that was the guidance the company was providing. Whether based on pent-up demand or something sort of revolutionary in store, it sounds like Apple is expecting the Let Loose event to let loose some serious sales of iPad. Perhaps addressing concerns that Apple is not spending enough on R&D around AI, Mr. Ng wondered whether analysts should anticipate changes to Apple's capital expenditure cadence as it leans into artificial intelligence. Short answer, no. Longer answer, Apple spends a lot on R&D of its own. It also spends a lot with partners with which it works on tooling, production, data centers, and so on. The company likes that hybrid model, and it's going to keep going that way. Even more prevalent than next week's Let Loose event on the call was whatever Apple plans to announce around AI at WWDC. To be clear, CEO Cook didn't say those exact words. Instead, he said things like, next month, we have our Worldwide Developers Conference, which has generated enormous enthusiasm from our developers. We can't wait to reveal what we have in store. He also indicated that was coming in an answer to Morgan Stanley analyst Eric Woodring. Taking all the fun out of the future, Woodring wanted to know how Apple planned to monetize AI. Selling AI services, driving upgrade cycles. Please, Mr. Cook, put it in my veins. For the most part, Cook declined, indicating that generative AI offers key opportunities across all of Apple's products, and that the company will talk more as we go through the weeks ahead. Sounds like WWDC to me. Melius analyst Ben Reitzes sort of asked a question around the DOJ case against Google and whether that might end up costing Apple, saying that there's fear out there that Apple might lose some traffic acquisition. Reitzes wondered whether AI might pick up some of that slack. And of course, that just gave Cook a chance to talk about how excited Apple is about AI and generative AI. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks, said the CEO. Adding, I think there are numerous ways there that are great for us, and we think we are well positioned. UBS analyst David Vogt wondered what is going to turn the iPhone around. Will it be AI? Will it just be the normal replacement cycle? Roll it up for me, Mr. Cook, that I might smoke it. In a not-so-Yoda way, Cook seemed to counsel patience. AI is going to do a lot for Apple devices, was Cook's indication, though not in the next quarter or two. Really though, if not for the $5 billion thing, iPhone sales would have been flat, according to Cook. Richard Kramer with Arete Research had a question that seemed to turn on CFO Luca Maestri. Are emerging markets in aggregate getting bigger than China? Pointing out that China is obviously Apple's largest emerging market, and won't China be excited to hear it's still considered emerging? Yet other countries like India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, together, their numbers are getting large. A low market share in those regions, plus large and growing populations, leave Apple with a level of excitement that is very high. It's very good for Apple. The numbers in those markets are getting larger all the time, said Maestri. And yeah, the gap between them and China is getting smaller. Now, I said earlier that one wonders how much faith should be placed in the Kantar numbers touted by Tim Cook. Those are the ones that had an iPhone as the top-selling smartphone last quarter in the US, the UK, Australia, France, mainland China, Germany, and Japan. Cook did not question those numbers. And yet, when Wells Fargo analyst Aaron Rakers asked, I guess I'm going to go back to the China question. I guess at a high level, the simple question is, when we look at the data points that have been repeatedly reported throughout the course of this quarter, I am curious, Tim, what are we missing? Cook responded, I can't address the data points. I can only address what our results are, and, we did accelerate last quarter, and iPhone grew in mainland China, so that's what the results were. I can't bridge to numbers we didn't come up with. But, he's happy to talk about the numbers they didn't come up with, that he's happy with. One more question, just for fun. B of A analyst Wamsi Mohan asked about the impact of the EU's Digital Markets Act and Apple's compliance with it. CEO Cook said that it was really too soon to comment on that. For now, Apple is working to comply while also working to mitigate privacy and security risks to its users. Was that everything? No, it was not. Lots of ways for you to grok the fullness, though. You can catch a replay of the call on Apple's investor site for the next couple of weeks. You can also download it as a podcast for the next couple of weeks. If you want to pore over every word, props to the peeps at 6 Colors, once again super quick with a transcript of the call. It's a bit early for reaction from analysts, but investors got a bit tingly on Thursday. After the close of trading on Thursday and before the call with investors, Apple shares shot up like a rocket. According to a report from Apple Insider, Apple stock was having a tough year after some early gains until investors erased the loss after Thursday's earnings report. After the report, they rose 10.43 after hours. That puts them back in striking distance of the 185 and change where shares began 2024. We will hit analyst reaction and catch up on other news on Monday. macOS Can, brought to you by me and sponsored by ExpressVPN. Use the internet the way you want to. Subscribe and get an extra 3 months free at expressvpn.com/macOSCan. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSCan. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macoscan.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Can. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.